You paid for me now. Do it. The rancher did it. And then he had a wife. The wind rolled soft over the dust-bitten plains, carrying nothing but the hum of silence and the faint rattle of a tin can swinging from a rusted fence post. The sun hadn't yet broken the edge of the horizon, but the sky was bruised pink, like something trying to heal. A lone horse trudged through the morning fog, hooves crunching over dry gravel. Atop it sat a man with a weathered face and shoulders that knew the weight of war, loss, and too many empty winters. His name was Colt Braxton, a rancher by trade, a ghost by temperament. The land he rode was his father's once, but now just bone-dry acres and a house with more creaks than laughter. He wasn't looking for anything that morning, just riding, like he did when sleep wouldn't come and the silence of the cabin threatened to pull him under. But then he saw her. A girl, no older than 20, sitting alone on a fallen fence beam, ankles tied, dress torn like a flag after a storm. Her hands weren't moving. Her eyes didn't blink. But they were open, wide, wet, and far too still for dawn. Colt stopped his horse, without thinking, just stared. She didn't cry, didn't beg. She just watched him, as if waiting for something she already knew would come. The wind carried a low whistle. A hawk called from the distance. Colt dismounted slowly. His boots touched the dirt like he was stepping onto sacred ground. No one should have been there, not on his land, not this deep into nowhere. Yet here she was, skin bruised, lips split, wrists raw from the rope. She said nothing, just looked at him. And then, quietly, her lips moved. "You paid for me," she said. Her voice was dry as the wind. "Now do it." Colt didn't move. His heart, however, jolted like a struck horse. He hadn't paid for anyone. He hadn't spoken to a soul in weeks. But she was staring at him like he had, like he was the last man on earth with a decision to make. Colt crouched slowly, dust rising around his knees. He didn't speak, just looked at her, the way you might look at a wounded animal, half expecting it to bolt or bite. Her legs were shaking, not from cold, from fear that had set in so deep it moved on its own. But she didn't pull away, didn't ask again, just sat there, like she'd already accepted whatever was coming next. Colt felt the air tighten in his chest. "I didn't pay for you," he finally said, voice low. She didn't answer. A sliver of sun broke through the clouds, catching the cut on her cheek. Dry blood, sharp, red against pale skin. Something flickered in Colt's mind. A younger version of himself, maybe 10 years old, holding his mother's hand outside a train station in Abilene. She was bruised too, silent, like this girl. Back then, no one had helped. Just passed by, boots tapping, eyes averted. He remembered the way she looked at him when she said, "This world ain't made for soft women, Colt." Then she was gone. This girl, this stranger, had the same look. Hollow, but waiting. Colt stood up, turned his back. His boots crunched. One step, then another. Distance stretched thin. But he didn't get far. He stopped. The wind picked up. Something inside him, old, buried, twisted. He didn't know her story. Didn't know what man left her there or why she thought she'd been paid for. But he knew pain. Knew what it did to people when no one gave a damn. He turned, walked back. She flinched slightly, the only sign she wasn't made of stone. Colt pulled a knife from his belt. Not quick, not threatening, just honest. He knelt again, and with quiet hands, He cut the rope from her ankles. No words, just the sound of strands snapping one by one. She didn't thank him, didn't run. She just sat there, legs free now but frozen, like freedom was too big a T-Death's hing to wear suddenly. Colt stood, looked out over the empty land. "You got a name?" he asked. Still silence. He didn't press. He never did. He offered a hand. She stared at it. Then, slowly, placed hers in it. It was rough, cold, like holding a rock left out in the wind. He helped her up. Didn't say anything when she winced. Didn't ask questions when she looked at the horse with fear in her eyes. He just nodded, like he understood. They didn't speak again as he lifted her onto the saddle. He walked beside the horse, back toward the ranch. And in that quiet, heavy morning, Colt Braxton made a choice he couldn't take back. He brought her home. The girl didn't speak for 2 days. Colt gave her space. Let her sleep in the barn near the hay and oil lamp. Safer there. Warmer, too. The house still held ghosts, and he figured she'd had enough of men and rooms with locks. He left her food, never watched her eat, never asked questions. But on the 3rd morning, her voice cracked the silence. "He'll come looking," she said, eyes fixed on the grain sack in her lap. Colt looked up from where he was shoeing a horse. "Who?" She swallowed. "Clyde Marrow. He owns the Dust Bell Saloon." The name hit like a cold nail in Colt's gut. Clyde Marrow wasn't just a saloon man. He ran women, loans, and half the outlaws between Dry Creek and the border. A man who never left marks where the sheriff could see. "He sells girls," she said flatly, "but only the pretty ones, the others. He burns through them. When they stop crying, he stops feeding." Colt's jaw clenched. "He told me some rancher paid a bounty. Said it was my way out. I thought it was a lie. But then he tied me up and left me by the fences." She looked at Colt. "That wasn't you?" "No," he said. Silence hung thick. "But he'll think it was," she added. "He'll come for his money. Or for me." That night, Colt didn't sleep. He watched the edge of the hills, lit only one lantern, checked his rifle twice. By dawn, the girl had packed her things, a single torn satchel and a scarf she'd found in the barn. She stood by the gate like sure it meant to leave. "You stay here," Colt said. "I can't," she whispered. "You'll get killed." He shook his head. "A man dies more than once in his life. I've done it already." She stared at him. "No one ever stood between him and a girl," she said. He nodded toward the hills. "Then, maybe it's time someone did." Later that day, a note was found on Colt's front gate. Burned at the edges, written in red. "She's mine. You got till sundown." No name, no signature, just a warning. Colt stared at it, eyes calm. Inside, the girl sat by the fireplace, curled beneath a blanket. He didn't tell her about the note, but he loaded the rifle that night. And every shadow that moved, he watched like it was already drawing breath to kill. The days slowed down like honey in cold water. They didn't speak much, but the silence between them began to shift, less like a wall, more like a shared coat in the wind. Colt showed her how to fire the Winchester. He didn't ask if she wanted to learn, just placed the rifle in her hands one dusk, when the wind was still and the sky bled orange. He showed her the weight, the breath, the patience of it. She missed the first shot, flinched, then again. But by the 5th, her hands steadied. He didn't smile, didn't praise, just handed her a fresh cartridge. She nodded. That was enough. In the evenings, she cooked, badly at first, oversalted beans, burnt cornbread. But Colt ate without complaint. He hadn't tasted anything made by another human in months, maybe years. One night, after a quiet supper, she pointed at the scar on his forearm. "Bullet?" she asked. Colt shook his head. "A man with a bottle. My father." She didn't flinch, just nodded, then pulled her sleeve up and revealed a twisted mark along her shoulder, old, but cruel. "Marrow's men," she said simply. He looked at her, not with pity, just knowing. And in that moment, neither was alone anymore. They began moving together, like two halves of something fractured but trying. She cleaned his boots without asking. He fixed the barn roof before the rains. She found a little harmonica in one of the storage trunks, played it quietly on the porch some nights. Off-key, sad. He didn't stop her. On the fifth evening, Colt carved her a new nameplate for the barn's empty stall. Didn't ask what her real name was, she hadn't given it. He just etched a word into the wood. Safe. She saw it. Didn't say anything. But that night she cried under the stars, soundless, buried in the blanket he'd left for her. He didn't interrupt, just stood by the window, watching the night, guarding. Somewhere between the silence, something fragile grew. Not love, not yet, but trust, maybe. The kind built slowly, like fence posts after a storm. There was no future yet, no plan, just two people trying not to be ghosts anymore. And for a brief moment before the threat returned, it almost felt like peace. They came at sundown, just like the note had promised. 3 riders. Dust kicked up behind them like smoke from a slow fire. Colt watched from the porch, rifle in hand, hat pulled low. The girl stood behind the doorframe, silent but ready. Her fingers clutched the edge of her borrowed shawl. No tremble this time. The riders didn't shout, didn't call his name. They just stopped outside the fence, leaned on their saddles, and waited. One of them, the tallest, spit a wad of tobacco and grinned. "We ain't here to cause trouble," he lied. Colt stepped down, boots hitting dirt like war drums. "You passed 20 miles of open land to get here," Colt said. "That ain't visiting." The rider tilted his head. "You got something of ours." Colt didn't blink. "She ain't a thing." The man's grin faded. His hand drifted toward his belt. "She's property, old man. Paid for. By a man who don't like being stolen from." A beat of silence. Then the girl stepped out from behind the door. She walked until she stood beside Colt, shoulder to shoulder, eyes locked on the men who used to own her screams. "I walked away," she said, voice clear. "I wasn't yours." The tall rider chuckled. "That ain't how Clyde tells it." Then behind them, hoofbeats. Another rider, a fourth, smaller, younger. As he drew near, Colt's jaw tensed. The boy dismounted, face hidden under a wide-brimmed hat. Then he looked up. Colt's breath caught. It was Eli, his brother's son. The last blood Colt had after the war, after the graves. "What are you doing here?" Colt asked, voice like gravel. Eli looked ashamed. They hired me. Said it was just a pickup. I didn't know it was you." The girl's eyes flicked between them. Confusion. Panic. Colt raised his rifle, but not at Eli. At the riders. "You want her," he said. "You ride through me." The men laughed, but not for long. The first shot cracked like a bone snapping in the cold. Colt dropped one rider clean off his saddle. The second fired back. Missed. Eli stood frozen, torn between blood and fear. The girl grabbed the spare rifle from inside the barn, the one Colt had let her clean but never use. She fired. Her shot hit the second rider's leg, sending him screaming into the dirt. The last man, the tall one, turned and ran. coward's heart. Colt didn't chase. He dropped the rifle, chest rising hard, blood on his sleeve, a graze, nothing deep. But the moment had already carved them all. Eli stared, shaking. Colt walked to him. "You got a choice now," he said. Eli nodded slowly, then mounted his horse and rode, not back to town, but toward the hills. Away from Clyde. Away from blood money. The dust hadn't settled, but the world had already changed. The bodies lay where they fell, still, twisted in death's final pose. Buzzards circled, distant but patient. The wind moved slow again, as if mourning. Colt knelt by the fence, pressing a cloth to his arm. Blood soaked through, but it was shallow. He'd known worse. He'd survived worse. A girl stood by the barn, rifle lowered. Her face was unreadable. No tears. Just that same quiet fire that had kept her alive this long. They didn't speak. Didn't need to. Later, they buried the dead, behind the rise, where the land was soft. Colt dug the holes himself. The girl stood beside him, holding the lantern as dusk crept back in. No prayers, no names, just dirt on wood and the sound of breath. When it was done, Colt leaned against the shovel and stared at the grave mounds. "You ever kill before?" he asked, voice flat. She nodded once. "Not like that." He didn't respond, just looked at her. Really looked. There was something different in her eyes now. Not peace, not safety, but power. A thread of her had come back from the dark. He limped toward the barn. She followed. Inside, he sat down near the hearth. Firelight danced across the room, soft and golden. She made tea, poured 2 cups. Her hands no longer shook. She handed him one, sat across from him. For a long time, they sipped in silence. The warmth filled the space. Words couldn't. Outside, the wind shifted. Boots sounded at the door. Light, hesitant. Eli stepped in, hat in hand. "I buried the horses," he said. "Didn't think they should be left." Colt nodded. Eli looked at the girl. "You all right?" She gave the faintest of nods. Then, softly, Colt spoke. "You can stay the night. Head west at first light." Eli hesitated. "You sure?" "Yeah," Colt said. "But don't go back to Marrow." "I won't." And just like that, Eli was family again. That night, the house felt less haunted. Still, but not hollow. The girl slept in the small room, door cracked open, lamp burning low. Colt sat outside on the porch, rifle across his lap, watching the moon climb. He didn't know what tomorrow held. But tonight, they'd survived. And that sometimes was enough. Winter came late that year, brushing the plains in silence. The ranch stood steady through it. Repaired fence posts, a chimney that smoked again, and a kitchen that smelled of something other than dust and regret. The girl, now called June, never spoke of Aj, her old name again. Colt never asked. Some things deserve burial without ceremony. She stayed. What started as shelter turned to rhythm. 2 plates at every meal, 2 pairs of boots by the door, a scarf hung next to a hat. No words marked the shift. Just small things, a fresh coat of paint on the porch rail, wildflowers growing near the barn. Eli sent letters, said he'd found work up north, clean work. Sent money sometimes, but Colt never cashed it, just kept the envelopes in a drawer. Clyde Marrow disappeared not long after the shootout. Some said he skipped town. Others said he was found hanging from a tree down by Miller's Gorge. Colt never asked. He'd seen enough of justice to know it didn't always wear a badge. June learned to ride. Colt taught her slow. She fell once, cracked her ribs and bruised her pride, but she got back on, and when she did, something broke free inside her. She laughed, loud and full, like it had been hiding her whole life. That night, Colt didn't sleep on the porch. He sat across from her at the table. She poured the coffee. He passed the bread. Neither said the word home, but it hung there, invisible, sacred. Years later, when the townfolk whispered stories of the rancher who never remarried, they spoke of the girl with the dark eyes and scarred hands who walked beside him. Some said she was a debt paid. Others said she was a wife earned. But those who visited the ranch would always notice one strange thing. By the edge of the field, near the wildflowers, stood a wooden sign. Not a name, not a warning, just one word, carved deep, safe. And under the sky that never asked questions, they stayed,